All right, John. So thanks so much for agreeing to do to this. We
Sure.
are doing our first MSD family story. So the Zoom thing should hopefully work. And so I'm just going to go through and kind of prompt you with a few questions, but let
Sure.
you tell all about you and your kids and Barbie. So the first thing I guess is tell us a little bit about how old you are now, how old, kind of go back, how old you were when you had Barbie, and then between the siblings, where she was in the range.
Well, I'm now 73, and of course, uh, Barbie was born in 1976, so I was born in 47, so I was 29 when Barbie was born.
Okay.
And my wife's the same age, so we are in our late 20s. I was in graduate school at Baylor University in Texas, and Kathleen had an unremarkable pregnancy. That's supposed to be a good thing. And but when she was born, we had full expectation she was daughter number two. We had full expectation of a good healthy baby. Kathleen was a nurse and you know had placed great emphasis on prenatal care and did all the right things, etc. And it was probably within the first year or so, year and a half or so, we began to realize that she wasn't developing uh, according to the milestones, et cetera. But this is back in the 70s, and MSD was really unknown. I think Barbie is like the second documented case. There had appeared one case before. And so we, as graduate schools, we were poor, graduate students, we were poor and living in student housing and going through the daily grind of exams and raising a family and, that kind of thing.
It was Kathleen working as a nurse then?
No, Kathleen at that time was just I say just, but I don't mean it
Yeah.
that way, but she was a homemaker
Okay.
and took care of the kids as I went to school. We were living on a couple of pennies every day, and so as a graduate student, you're kind of limited in your resources, et cetera. But I was retired from the Army from wounds I'd received in Vietnam. So we had a small Army pension coming in that helped pay for some of the medical bills and stuff like that. We had medical insurance that way, which turns out to be a godsend.
Yeah.
But as we had full expectation. Barbie was, uh, she had a great personality, and she played with her sister, and all of those kind of good things that you experience.
And I know I had you get a couple pictures. Pull the
Right.
one out of her when she's littlest, the youngest
Well,
one.
there's a couple here. I'll share one with you. Here's Barbie. Kind of, this is taken by her uncle, my brother, who's a photographer, and she's kind of got that attitude, like, "What are you looking at?"
Yeah.
Like she had that personality once in a while.
How old do you think
Yeah.
she was there?
Oh, there she was probably
Because she's
maybe
standing, so
yeah, she's
she's
saying about a year and a half, 2 years maybe.
okay. So she
Okay.
she crawled and then walked and stood and did all that, but was just a little delayed, right?
Well, she started walking or standing up and that kind of stuff around 9, 10 months. So it was right on target.
Okay.
But I do recall an incident where we went over to a family for a family dinner type of thing, and just etc. And they had a child that was the same age as Barbie. And I noticed at that time that the little boy was much more precocious than Barbie was, and he would climb on the sofa and the chair and that kind of thing and jump up there. And I noticed that Barbie struggled a little bit. It was subtle,
Right.
but I noticed that there was a difference. And
And you kind of described to me before like cautious, like she was very cautious.
very cautious.
Yeah.
And that will amplify with time as she became less and less steady on her
Okay.
feet. uh, I can recall when I left Baylor University in 1977. So Barbie was about 3 at that. No, she was about 1.5, something like that.
Okay.
And went to Florida State University in Tallahassee for my postdoc. So we traveled there and we bought a house. And I remember we left there in 79. So she was about 3 at that time. And I would notice that she had very much, she had, by that time, she had trouble walking.
Okay.
And it was kind of interesting because we knew something was wrong and we were taking her to doctors at that time and trying to figure out, this is before the Human Genome Project and
Right.
before they knew the disease, et cetera. And
Like, were
uh,
you taking her to a pediatrician or who
well,
you
we took
even?
her to neurologists, we took her to pediatricians, we took her to Stanford University, Washington University in St. Louis, University of Florida Medical Center in Florida. We took to well, I hate to admit it, but we took it to this nutritionist kind of kook doctor. I mean, when you don't know,
Right.
you go
Right.
anybody who makes a promise to help you, you go there, you
Right.
know?
Because they're like, oh, maybe she's not getting the proper nutrition, or
Right.
maybe
And
she
that was
needs
one of
more
the
of
big
this or
things,
less.
you
Yeah.
know? And so, a couple $1,000s later, you realize, we just got taken. So I admit to that. I mean, but you're desperate.
Right.
We went to all over the country trying to find somebody who could understand what was going on, and nobody could.
Did
And
they
by that
say,
time,
like, because she's regressing, so it's like she's
yeah,
stumbling and then she's
right.
crawling and then she's not moving? Are they
And
like,
she was
oh, we don't know
aware of
what
it.
it is? Or
Yeah, she was aware of that too. It was very interesting in our child in Barbie. She would walk, and then I'll give you a good example. When we were in Florida, she must have been around 2 or 3 at that time, and and she would walk on something that was very solid, like, let's say, for example, a driveway, cement driveway we had. But when I tried to get her to walk on the grass to me, she wouldn't do it. She'd
mm,
come right up to the edge and she would stop because she knew it wasn't solid. It was grass and it
right.
was very unsteady for her, and she wouldn't do it.
Mm,
And so I realized, these things come up on you, but she was aware, and she would sometimes, when she would fall, Kathleen would notice this, she would look at her legs and say, "What is wrong?" before she
mm,
fell. I mean, she knew something was
mhm.
wrong. She couldn't communicate at that time. She never had speech. And so, but you could tell the way she would react. She would look down at her knee or at her ankles and say, "What's wrong?" It wouldn't move correctly. So she was aware at that time.
Did she
And
cry or get frustrated or
no, she
anything?
got
Or
frustrated,
okay.
but she didn't cry. The only time Barbie ever cried was when she was in pain. That was her
Mm,
signal to us that something was wrong.
right.
And I think probably many MSD families have experienced this. When your child is crying and you don't know what's wrong,
Right.
you panic. Oh
Right.
my God. I mean, it's bad enough that my child has this horrible disease or something wrong, but to not be able to figure out what's causing your child agony. I
Right.
don't think there's anything worse than that. And
Yeah.
I
It's
talk
really
all the
hard to
time.
explain that because I think we're used to, or, with our other kids, it's like my
Right,
tummy hurts, my
right,
head
right.
hurts, this hurts.
Yeah,
And,
I remember one time we had to. She was in such pain. She was crying, and I mean, for hours. And
mm,
finally, you take her down to the emergency room, and you say, "Oh, we don't know what's wrong with her." You explain, she's got MSD, yada yada yada, but we don't know what's wrong, and we're afraid for her that there's something, acutely wrong. Can you help us? And you watch these physicians, they're very interesting, is they don't either know. So they start going through kind of a checklist. Could
right.
it be this? Could it be, and they do tests and they do this and they do that. And this may go on for hours. And then finally she calms down or they do something, and you can see they're going through this process of trying to figure out. And of course, you're absolutely emotionally distraught, and they're trying to help you, and you're trying not to interfere,
Right.
and, do you have any idea, like these kind of panic acute situations occur uh, occasionally, at least in Barbie's case. But when they occurred, everything was focused then on trying to help your child, at least get them comfortable. You know,
Right. Right.
it's a horrible feeling.
Yeah, that feeling.
And,
Talk about like that day when she was on the steps and she
oh
was standing there looking at you.
yeah, uh, this is a very. I'm not a very religious guy, and when people talk about God talks to me and I have prophecies, all that kind of, I don't really. I have a lot of problem with that. So I'm not a really religious guy, but this was almost what I would call a religious experience. It's very difficult to comprehend until you go through it. But Barbie by that time had stopped walking, and she only thing she could still do was sit up. And one day, Kathleen was out with the other children that we had, and it was just Barbie and me. And we're on a landing. We had a kind of a split level, and we're on a landing. And Barbie was sitting up looking at me. Her hands were kind of folded like this, and she's just looking at me. And I was looking at her, and we were just sharing. And then a thought came to my mind, and I can't explain it, but it was a thought that came to my mind. It was like Barbie and I were in the moment together. I can't explain it, but it was like mental telepathy. It's like she was speaking to me. And the thought came, okay, this is exactly what, okay, one more time. And I didn't know what that meant. One more time. Now, Barbie had not walked or stood up for months. And she looked at me and I looked at her. She didn't say anything, but then she got up and stood.
Mm,
Hadn't done it in months,
mm,
for about 10 seconds or so. And then she fell back on her little butt. And that was the last time
mm,
Barbie ever stood up. And I can't explain it. It was like a message from God. It was like mental telepathy. That's the best way I can
mm.
explain. Well, we were in the moment. We were together. And it was like a gift God gave to me.
Yeah, to be connected like that.
It
Oh,
was
John,
amazing.
I'm sorry.
It was amazing. It
I don't
was
want to
a,
make this painful for you.
well, no, it's a
Yeah,
beautiful memory.
yeah.
And it never happened again. But uh, it was it was it was just an amazing experience. Yeah.
They're amazing children, and I think we don't know what goes on in their head
No, but
as
it's very.
as
I remember
yeah.
when Barbie graduated, you know, quotes from school, from my
Hmm.
school. She was 21 at the time. Because when children like ours, when they're allowed educational experience until age 21, and
Okay.
so for those parents whose child is in a special school, it goes beyond 18. It goes usually to age 21. And I remember I was asked to give a commencement speech for the graduating students in
Oh,
Barbie's class. And the thought that came to me is, and I tried to get this across to the parents and the audience in the small little, I mean, there were only three or four students graduated. And I said, one thing I really admire about Barbie and am awestruck. And I think if you're a parent, only a parent can understand. And that is the daily struggle that these children go through by themselves just to breathe and to
mhm.
live every day. Because I've seen Barbie struggle and I saw her struggle. every day of her life. And she would often get, not often, but she sometimes would get pneumonia, or she would have breathing problems, which doctors told us would be the thing that would take her life, and which in fact did. But as I reflected on Barbie's accomplishments, as few as they were, I said her greatest accomplishment was her daily struggle just to live.
Yeah, every minute is a fight for them.
Every
I
minute,
think they, yeah,
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 they struggled every minute and they never complained.
yeah,
And they only cried when they were in pain.
yeah,
And it was a quiet courage. He
yeah,
says, "You help me, mom and dad, and I'll do whatever I can to live."
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about, so, this is the decline's happening,
Yeah,
and you spent 6.5 years trying to
six and
figure
a half
out what
years,
was,
kind of.
yeah.
Well,
S-
yeah.
And
Well,
like that
it,
process and how you finally figured it
well,
out.
again, this is back in the 70s and the 80s, as I say before. A lot of the advancements, since this is genetic, uh, many of the advances that we see today, when a parent, you know, today, for example, when they realize something is wrong and they go to their doctor, and then, within a couple of months or a week or a couple of weeks or whatever, they come back with a genetic analysis that says your child is MSD. That's totally different than the world I was in.
Right.
These doctors didn't know, and they had no clue. We went to pediatric people, we went to neurologists, we went to geneticists, we went to everybody. They kind of knew it was genetic, but they said, this is before the Human Genome Project.
Right.
Genes were not mapped at that time. So they just said, take her home and love her as best you can. And so finally, we were talking to our neurologist at the National Naval Medical Center in DC, and a pediatrician who was doing a fellowship in genetics asked me if it would be possible if he could take over her case, since the neurologist kind of gave up. He said, "I've just got nothing for you. I don't know what it is." You know. So we said, of course, you're looking for anybody who'll take her case and will advocate for her and fight for her and help you. What a lot of people don't understand is that as a parent, you don't want your child to die from an unknown disease. I want to know who this monster is. I mean, I may not be able to help, and I can only speak for myself, but it was important for me to know, who this monster was.
Well, and so you have the answers too to those questions of, can I feed her something? Can I do something? Can we give
Right,
her more
exactly.
PT? Can we give her
Right.
more OT? Is there something I could be doing to make
Right.
it better for her? It's
And
like
I needed
without a
to know who this,
diagnosis, you don't know that.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I know many parents who lost children uh, when the diagnosis was never determined, and they
Mm,
they kind of carry that with them. Is there something I could have done? If only
right.
I knew what I was fighting, then maybe I
Right.
could, type of thing. Anyway, this doctor basically said, we don't know what it is, but right across the street from Naval Med was the National Institutes of Health. And so, of course, to get into NIH, you have to be nominated by a doctor because your case is so rare and so unknown and so strange. And NIH is a research organization, and they're looking for patients like this. So they accepted Barbie, and they didn't know what it was. And so we would go there periodically. And then her physician at NIH finally said, can you bring Barbie in? We have this physician that's visiting NIH. Now we're 6 years into our search. And of course, we jump at a chance like that. And it was a very old gentleman. It was kind of funny. I have to give you the kind of the background of what happened that day. You have all these really preeminent physicians, the Dr. Fauci's of their world, right? The experts in their field, and et cetera. And these are the smart, these are the big brains
Like the elite of the elite, because they're, yeah,
the elite of the elite.
yeah.
And they didn't know it was wrong, and they were bringing in consultants trying to figure out. And you have to understand that these are researchers basically, and they're really they have no bedside manner. As far as Barbie was concerned, they were kind of a Barbie was a guinea pig. And you understand that going in, they're very, he said, you know, our primary responsibility is while it is a patient, the fact is we're really interested in the research aspects and the biochemistry and the strangeness of your child.
Right.
You just have to accept that. That's the way it is.
Right. It's not to go in for care. Like they're not going to
Right,
tell you
exactly.
how
I mean,
to
because
take
they
care of
realize
it.
by the time you're at NIH, you're not really looking for a cure. You're looking
Right.
for, you know, a diagnosis. And so these doctors were looking over Barbie, and they brought this consultant in, Dr. Kogan, who was an ophthalmologist of all things. And Barbie was blind, etc. And they asked Dr. Kogan, you know, would you look at Barbie? And one of the most beautiful things he ever did, honest to God, it was great. Kathleen and I were kind of in the corner of the room, and Barbie was in the bed, and all these doctors were around the bed, you know, paying attention to Barbie and to this Dr. Kogan, and we're in the kind of in the background there, you know, nobody acknowledged us at all. And before he examined Barbie, he came over to us, and he introduced himself. Nobody had acknowledged us in the room at all, really. Came over to us and acknowledged us and said, "I'm Dr. Kogan, and I would love to be able to examine your daughter. May I do so?" Now,
To have the
the
privilege.
humanity that he expressed in doing that to me was so meaningful that he
Mm,
acknowledged us as people.
mm.
And uh, we were so grateful to him. And so he examined Barbie, and we were there, and he kind of sat back, you know, touched his chin like this and says, "I've seen this before." You know, everybody's called, "Ooh, what is it? Has anybody considered multiple sulfatase deficiency?" Nobody knew what that was. And these are, you know, the elite of the elite. He says, "Yeah, you might want to check into that." And by God, that's what it was. And we went and did some biochemical studies, did some fibroblasts, you know, cultures, and they sent off the cells to Yale University's lab, and they came back a couple of weeks later and said, "Yes, that's, you know, we've got it." The way they did it was not by means of looking at the gene, but looking at the biochemistry, you know, some of the enzymes, you know, aryl sulfatase A, and, you know, and those things, and said, yeah, they were deficient and absent. And they confirmed that that was the diagnosis. And of course, then we got the news that this is a fatal disease, nothing to do, take your child home.
Mm.
And you know, and nobody was working on anything. Of course, it was too rare. This is only case number 2 that was known. So,
And that was from looking at her eyes.
and that was from looking at her eyes, from
Yeah.
this physician who, in the ophthalmology world, apparently was a very esteemed physician, and he's the one who found it. It's a very
Wow.
strange story.
So, okay, so you take her home, you take care of her for
Right,
years,
right.
and you are connected to families throughout this time. Like they could find you, or like through the leukodystrophy.
Yeah, United Leukodystrophy Fund Foundation. You know, they had MSD as one of their things, but they didn't really emphasize that much about it. Uh, I'm not. Kathleen actually, she's because it's a genetic disease. Okay, and her background is pure Irish. You know, both sides of her family, her mother and her father, are from Ireland and that kind of thing. So she was going around writing to people and et cetera. And she said, this disease must exist in Ireland because, you know, it's an autosomal recessive disease, et cetera. And we actually had Irish radio contact her, and because she did a plea to the Irish American Society. There's a medical society in which the Irish doctors come over to the USA and they have a conference. And so Kathleen contacted them and, did this exist in Ireland and that kind of thing. And So I finally, they advertised in a paper or something, and Irish radio picked that up and called Kathleen and interviewed her, et cetera. And it was kind of interesting, to
Yeah.
do things like that. We came
And
across a couple in Australia,
okay.
another couple in Boston. Their children have since passed away. Um, each of them had two children, uh, but we got to know them. And this is again prior to the MSD Foundation and the internet and that kind of thing. And so uh, we just, kind of quietly struggled without knowing anybody else, not knowing you or Alan Finglass in Ireland and that kind of thing. And until, Willow got diagnosed and you just said, I'm not gonna take this anymore.
Well, and the timing was right where,
Yeah, the time was right.
I guess, might have been a little pre. I mean, I think the
Well,
timing's right
the
right
internet had,
now, but you had to start it. You had to,
yeah,
it's like we
somebody had
had
to
to get
start
the
it.
money and
Yeah,
get it going. And so,
right,
yeah. So, okay. So, you got involved with the foundation. We had a Facebook group set up
right,
before, and I think, I don't know if we met through there or through Alan or however we did it. We started
yeah,
talking
right,
and we formed the foundation, and then you came on as a board member, and then Jen, your daughter, it's your oldest daughter, right? She
that's
your
correct.
oldest? Yeah. So she's a physician.
Mhm,
She came on and was president of our board last year, and then now
right,
you're president of our board this year. So, and then in the meantime, while you're kind of getting involved with us, Barbie passes away. So in 2017, right?
right, in February of
Yep.
2017. Yeah, Barbie had, we had asked the physicians, or I had asked the physicians early on after the diagnosis back in the 1980s. I finally just said to them, we said, okay, how will Barbie die? I mean, and the reason I did that, they said these children don't live very long.
Right.
And I wanted to spare the pain of Kathleen of, being totally confused when Barbie would pass away. We only expected her to live a couple more years. And the doctor said, well, she may live into her teens at the outermost, but she'll probably die from a respiratory disease. He said she'll probably struggle to, if she gets pneumonia or something like that, or during the middle of the night when you're sleeping and she's sleeping, she'll just stop breathing, and you'll wake up in the morning and go in to take care of her, and you'll realize she's passed. So I said, okay. So we were always sensitive to that, and I remember one time. This is probably 4 or 5 years before Barbie did pass away. uh, we were, Kathleen and I kept Barbie with us until she did pass away. She was 40 when she died. So we were with her for 40 years. We were changing diapers for 40 years,
Yeah.
uh, et cetera. And anyway, I remember one night, we went ahead and got the DNR in place because we didn't want to, guys, they said, you want to worry about that because if Barbie has problems breathing and you call EMT to come and help revive her or something, and they have to put something down her throat, a ventilator down her throat, it's very difficult to get those out. You can get all kinds of problems. All kinds of people come out of the woodwork, life living at all costs, take it in, take it out, that kind of thing. So you don't want to do that when she's under physical distress. So we got a DNR, and uh, one day, Kathleen was taking care of Barbie. She went in to take care of Barbie. It was in the evening, and Barbie stopped breathing. I mean, literally, just she's breathing fine, et cetera. And suddenly, Kathleen calls me in, and she says, "John, Barbie's not breathing." And we looked at each other. We held each other. We thought that this would be it, that she just stopped, and we were not gonna. We said, if God wants to take her now, then let her go. And about 45 seconds later or so, because we were saying goodbye. She takes a big breath and then she starts breathing again. And for MSD families, these kind of little emergencies, these little acute episodes occur and you don't know what to do. For us in that point in time, and then we took care of her and things went back and, she lived, until she got pneumonia uh, in February of 2017. And she had she had she had thrown off pneumonia several times during her lifetime, so it wasn't unusual. Of course, we had her on immediately got her on antibiotics and that kind of thing, and we were suctioning her out. I mean, MSD family members, parents know about suctioning their children, and but this time the mucus was very thick. I mean, it was like glue almost. I mean, it was horrible. And
Mm,
suctioning out, even the suction tube got stuck, and we would get in there and get what we could get out, and then we'd clean that out and go back in there. Of course, very, we're stressed, and Barbie's stressed, and she's trying to breathe, etc. It's what you go through as a parent. You just do
right.
it,
Yeah.
and so we put Barbie to bed, and we'd suction her out, and she was breathing okay, and then during the night, early morning, I just somehow woke up and I could hear Barbie struggling to breathe. And I went to try to take care of her and suction her out. And I got Kathleen up and I called Jennifer, her sister, who's also a physician, because I could not get the mucus out. I
Mm,
couldn't. And I struggled and I tried and we suctioned as best we could. And then she stopped breathing. And
mm,
the three of us around her. And I remember Jennifer was very stressed. And she says, this is when, and she turned to me and she says, this is not what this is. I'm just not a good physician right now. She was, because she didn't have any tools, any medical tools to help Barbie. And you know, so then Barbie just stopped breathing and
mhm,
she passed very quietly.
mm. How have you seen kind of the outlook change? Now that we've gotten in there and
Right.
funded this research, and you've been right in the middle of it and seen it all happen. How is this change for parents who
Well,
are diagnosed now,
I think the
families
first
diagnosed now?
thought that I think the biggest change is the first thought that comes to mind when I hear about a new family that has learned that their child has MSD. Um, I think of the family and recently that from Minnesota, and the family recently that announced from India that has MSD. But there have been other examples. My first thought to them, as I reach out to them through Facebook and our page, etc., is there is hope. And I can't tell you how important I think that is, because when we received the diagnosis in Barbie, the physicians said there is no hope, because there was no hope in two ways. There was no hope because there was no treatment, and no hope because there was nobody looking to develop a treatment because it was so rare. It was an oddity. It was a medical curiosity, if you will. Tragic, but a curiosity, and not worth the time and effort, because there are so many important and cancer and heart disease and
Bigger
diabetes,
things. Yeah.
that affect millions of people. And I understand that. So that was the situation when Barbie was diagnosed. Is I'm really sorry for this, and I'm sorry there's no treatment, but there's also nobody even working the issue. Okay. Today, that's not the case. And I, of course, congratulate you and Alan for beginning to say, who basically stood up and said, I'm not taking this. That's not going to happen. And So today there's hope in two ways. Number one, we are organized and we have shaken the medical research community. And we went to the big brains, that's the way I like to refer to them, the smart people,
Mhm.
and said, we've got a terrible problem here, and you're smart people. And if you will come up with ideas, if you will come up with approach, will you come up with research projects that will help us develop a treatment or a cure, we will find the money. Please, please help us. And, based upon uh, doing that, Alan Finglass in Ireland, for example, developed or hosted the very first MSD conference that you went to that basically grabbed the attention of the medical research community. We followed up with a request for proposals. We put together a scientific advisory committee to evaluate those proposals for their value and for their potential to find a cure. You went out there uh, tirelessly finding people and developing funding projects and coming up with money and still not enough, but we started. I
Right.
remember your advocacy for the gene therapy program that we currently are heavily involved in that has great potential. Uh, you just say, I'm going to do it. And I remember you put in the first, personally, put in your own personal money to get the thing started. So the one thing I want to tell parents, and I always, the first idea that comes to my mind is you're not alone and there's hope. And I don't say hope in the, there's real hope.
Right.
There's real research going on that is showing in the early stages that that there are some ideas that are bearing fruit. And the gene therapy program that we're conducting at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Research Center and Jackson Labs in Bar Harbor, Maine, they have developed, MSD mice. They have uh, using CRISPR technology, this new medical technology, to insert the gene into viruses that they put in the mice that have actually borne fruit, and the mice are now living when they would normally die. Uh, this is exciting stuff. And we're engaging other medical people, uh, other organizations to try to fully fund to get this to a clinical trial, which looks like it has the potential in the next 18 months to 2 years. Um, so for those families that are joining our community, which unfortunately have to join our community because of their child, uh, I want to let them know there's hope. There
Mhm.
is real hope. And I wouldn't say that if that wasn't true. Having had the privilege to participate in this campaign and to talk to these researchers, I can truly say that there is hope. I really believe that something will happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is.
You mentioned that, I financially contributed, you financially contributed,
Mhm.
and my child is still alive, so people could say, well, I have a, vested interest in it, although we don't know that she
Well, you
would get
do.
the treatment.
That's
But
fine.
you don't. So Barbie's gone.
Right.
Why would you financially contribute to this organization? Like what, and why should other people think about it?
Well, I hear what you're saying. As they say down south, I don't have any dog in the fight anymore.
Right, right.
Um, I can't think of a better way to spend my money. I've been blessed by God and others where I am financially in good shape. Okay. I'll just say that at that. You know, what better way to pay back, if you will, than to help those who are struggling, either financially, but no, who are struggling medically. I can't think of a better way to be thankful for the blessings that I've been given, the people I've met, the dedicated researchers. I mean, I'm listening to Rachel Bailey from UT Southwest the other day talking about the research that they're doing, and it was very apparent when she was talking to other researchers that we were on the phone with, that she says, these children, you know, we need to help we need to help these children. We need to help these families, and we have a process here that seems to be working. And she's right. So there's, hopefully I can either with my small contributions, I can impact somebody's life, some family's life, that their child will have a better quality of life because of my small contribution. Okay. Um, it's just, it's a privilege to be able to contribute. And the other people who have also done so, I'm in contact with an anonymous donor who doesn't want to be acknowledged, who has been more than gracious and given tons of money, and well, I'll say tons, but quite substantial amount,
Tons to us. Yeah.
and just because he heard the story, not only for me. I remember how when we when we walked across Ireland on a fundraiser for MSD, I remember this individual walk with me, and he listened to Alan Finglass tell his story. Alan being a MSD parent from Ireland. And he walked away and said, "Gee, are you a medical doctor, Alan?" And Alan, "No, I'm just a carpenter, you know, but I'm dedicated to finding and helping my child."
Hmm.
And he was so very
Brilliant.
impressed.
He's brilliant in the science. I mean, he's
He
amazing.
is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was so impressed that right then and there, he says, "Okay, I'll give you, and it was a substantial amount of money, right then and there, based upon a
Hmm.
conversation at an Irish pub, over Guinness. That's the way it started.
Hmm.
I guess my point is that I have I have found a group of people, I have found families that are dedicated to helping their fellow human being and those who are in pain and suffering. You can't find a better reason to share your resources than that, in my opinion. Okay, so it's a privilege to be able to be associated with this group and to contribute and to do whatever I can to help.
Yeah. I think you, like me, like when we go to clinical trial, hopefully in 2022,
Hmm.
we're going to be sitting there. Hopefully I'll be in the room, but probably not. And
Well,
that first child, I mean, like we all did that, you and me
yeah, I think that's
and all
correct.
our
I mean,
friends and
yeah,
family. And
I'll take great pride in the fact that I was able to make a contribution, not only financially, but to be participating and
yeah.
to be an advocate for such an organization and for these people. That if that first child, receives the treatment, and if it's successful, to know that I had a very small part to play in it. It is a privilege, and of course, the people you meet in fighting this, the MSD families and the
Yeah.
parents, the ability to, when they have a question, to give my experience and give my advice about an acute episode of something. Oh, how did you, how did, what kind of diet do you feed your child?
Right.
How do I get calories in? And, what did you do with bed sores? And what do you do with this? And, that's all those kinds of things. This is our fight. It's no individual's fight. It's our fight. And I'm privileged to be kind of on the front lines helping people if I can.
Awesome. Well said. Is there, it's kind of all the questions I had. Is there anything else you think we should talk about?
Um, Geez, I don't know. We talked about quite a few things.
Yeah.
I
Anything we
guess
forgot?
this is a human story. And one of the things that I experienced is that um, MSD is it affects everybody. And I would say to the MSD parents, one thing that I learned was that this affects your MSD child's siblings as well. and often they're in the background, and everything's about the MSD child. Okay, and of course it's not. And you as a parent, know that. But once in a while, you want to. I guess this is to the MSD family and parents. Once in a while, you want to hug your non-MSD child and say, sometimes you take the back seat and it's not right.
Mhm.
And I and to let them vent. I'll say one thing. I like to say one thing. One experience I had, and I think it's important, and it may resonate with some families and some parents, and may not with others. But if you ask me, what is the toughest time you go through? The toughest time you go through with your MSD child, and I'll tell you what my experience has been, and I feel very strongly about this. There are moments that occur. They're not often, but they're not unheard of. And when you go into a dark place, and that dark place is when you finally the reality of MSD hits you, and you realize you're fighting a losing battle, and you're doing all these things, and your child's getting worse, and you go to that dark place because you can't help, and you feel bad, and no encouraging words help. You're in a dark place. And when that happens, and that happens with me when Barbie is alive sometimes, and it happened with my wife Kathleen at times. And it just overwhelms you. And what we found was when Kathleen would go into a dark place like that, and I knew I couldn't say anything to her because I knew what she felt. She was facing the reality. My child's dying. It's getting worse every day. And so I would say to her, go to that dark place, come out of it when you can. I'll take care of Barbie. Don't worry about it. No matter what happens, I'm there for Barbie. You need to deal with that dark place as best as I can't help. I can't tell you you're wrong.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I get my phone here.
That's right.
But so what? Let me just hold on. So she would say the same thing to me. John, you're in that dark place right now. I'll take care of Barbie. And sometimes being in that dark place would take a minute, take a day or two or three. Then you'd come back and say, okay, I'm back. I'm
Yeah,
back.
and she'd like take a
I'm,
trip or go see family
I'm
or
back in the
yeah,
fight. But there
yeah,
was an even darker place, and that was when, and because these dark places would come up at unplanned times. It just overwhelms you. What was worse was when that dark place hit us at the same time. Then it was tough. That was the toughest part of being an MSD parent because I couldn't help Kathleen. She couldn't help me, but Barbie's needs were still there.
right.
And so you just gut it through. You
Mhm.
just gut it through. You don't know how, you don't know when. And it lasts for a couple of days. And then suddenly you're on the other side and you say, okay, I'm back. Kathleen would say she's back. So as long as we could avoid going into that dark place at the same time, then we had Barbie's needs covered very, very well. And when we were there together, then we just had to gut it through. And it's tough. It's tough. And you can't explain it to people. It just
Right. Well, and I think, I find myself sometimes looking at Willow when it's like you're caring for, caring for,
yeah,
caring for, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is tough, tough for
it is.
her. It's tough for
Absolutely.
her. And you kind of put yourself in her spot
Right.
and it's like, oh, it's
Yeah,
brutal. It's brutal.
it
And then
is.
you kind of have to get out of that because it's like I could go down a black
Yeah,
hole of,
exactly. Yeah, you got to kind of not
yeah,
let yourself go down there, but
yeah,
sometimes I found you just do.
right.
And then you
You
got
just
to
feel bad for her.
I don't
It's
have
just,
I don't have yeah,
yeah,
you do. And I don't have a way, I don't have an answer of how do you get out of it. It's kind of
right.
like you just get tired of feeling bad about it,
Right.
and you
And
come
you
back.
just do the next thing, people
Yeah,
all the time ask, like, "How do you do this?" It's like, "Well, how do I mean, you just do it. You just do the next
you
thing."
just do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
you
know
just
the
one
MSD
foot in front of
parents.
the fronter, you just do it. It's like she's not
Yeah,
gonna eat if we don't feed her. She can't, she's
right.
choking, you have to go suction her.
Yep,
So
yep.
you just do. Yeah,
Yeah, you do that, and I know the MSD parents out there know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
um, and I know I guess it's difficult, for other family members, let's say aunts and uncles and grandparents to understand that, and usually it's such a private moment anyway, that you don't share that with people outside your spouse and your children, even your grandparent, even the grandparents and the uncles and aunt, you just don't share it because
right.
it literally, it's a dark place, and it's a place you don't wanna go.
Right. Well, and a lot of people from the outside are very sympathetic, empathetic, and they're like, "How do you do this?" And and it's like sometimes I'm like, "That's not helping." It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
don't be
yeah.
sad for us
Yeah,
because,
don't be sad.
you
I
know,
know it's a bad place. I
right?
know
It
it's a
just
bad thing. You
is.
need to
I don't
emphasize
need you to sit there and tell me how sad it is.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
we just got to keep going. It is what it is. And so I think,
Yeah,
yeah, it's hard. That's hard for them too.
yeah,
And one more thing that I just thought
yeah,
of is we've talked about, when you get into this world, you encounter the feeding tube. Or
sure.
first it's the regression, the motor skills, you losing those, and then you the feeding tube, and then the suction, and then the bed sores, or
The the
the
orthopedic
hips are out of
surgery.
alignment, the
Yeah,
orthopedic stuff, and the next thing, and the next thing, and every single one of those on this side of it feels overwhelming.
yeah,
It's like I remember when we got feeding tube surgery, I was like, I can't do this. Like,
yeah,
I
right.
can't feed her. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know how to do. I'm not a nurse. Like, what? There's going to be a tube in her stomach.
yeah.
It's like each time you hit that point. So talk about, like, that part of things.
Well, that's interesting because, the thought that comes to mind, you're right. You get these medically acute situations, and first of all, you categorize them. Is this really bad, or is this another, whatever? Okay, so you kind of know which are the bad ones and which are the ones that are inconvenient or whatever, but it's not the emergency. It turns out for most of them, they're emergencies, so you got to deal with them. Okay, but one thing I learned over time, and I think the other parents hopefully will learn the same thing, is when a new emergency occurs, you don't panic. You say, "Oh, geez, okay, now what do I do? Okay, well, I'll do this, or whatever." I remember when Barbie, because of her lack of mobility and her length of life, okay, she succumbed to bed sores. And we took care of her and we moved her and we did all, and she had all uh, the tendon releases and and those kinds of things to keep her mobile and that kind of stuff. But she had a lot of orthopedic problems. She had the femur came out of the socket on both sides, and uh, she had to have rods put in the back of her spine because she is developing scoliosis, which finally her orthopedic surgeon says if you don't take care of this, she will bend over so much that she'll crush her heart. And, literally, um, so we didn't have a choice. Well, over time, when you put rods in, for example, down her spine, and from her neck down to her pelvis, to try to stabilize the spine, over time, you have to understand those rods are a foreign body. And so your body tries to reject them. And so these bed sores would just pop out. I mean, or she'd get a bed sore on the top of her neck and on the bottom of her spine, of course, and then we'd say, well, where did this come from? Where these, there was no break in the skin until finally they just pop open. And our physician said, well, when you brush your teeth, you know, um, you introduce bacteria, a little bit of bleeding in the gums or something. You never know, something like that. And of course, the body's been trying to reject these. So we developed bed sores. Some of them were quite severe and were life-threatening, and to the point because they would go to the bone and that kind of thing. So we had physicians telling us that uh, she wouldn't, she would succumb to them. But we fought on, and we were able to manage them up to the time that she died. Um, and so what you do is, what I found is you gain confidence in yourself as you learn how to manage. I'd say that especially to parents who are just managing their children and just found out about them and they haven't dealt with a lot of these medical acute issues. You will deal with them and you will learn how to deal with them and you will become very competent. You will become your child's best advocate. Okay. You'll get to know your child better than the physicians will. And as these medical issues come up, whether it be a bed sore, whether it be inserting a G tube, it be, whatever the issue is, surgeries, hip replacements, whatever. Um, it's kind of like, okay, this is the issue of the day. Let me deal with this issue. I'll worry about other issues at a different time. Okay. And eventually over time that, especially if you have a child who lived into their the teens and their 20s, you'll learn over time that, okay, a new issue will pop up, but I'll deal with it. I won't worry about it until
Right.
it pops up. I'll just deal with it, and you learn to
Yeah.
do that, and you learn and you'll develop confidence because you know your child and you know that you're taking care of them the best you can. And whatever failures you go through in terms, you just get more help or you'll get more advice or you'll talk to other parents. What did you do? And what did you do? And should I do this? And,
Right.
should I do that? Should I do this G tube thing? Oh my God, what happens if the G tube pops out? Well, you learn
Right.
how to pop it back in. Yeah, I mean, it
Right.
sounds simple,
Yeah.
but the first time you do it, when and you get that little hole in the stomach, and you see, oh my God, what am I going to do? And you see this, the G tube, and you go, in it goes.
Yeah.
You learn.
Right.
MSD parents are very strong people.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a tremendous burden. And I look at the family that took their child up to Minnesota for the bone marrow transplant uh, activity and
Mhm.
possibility. What tremendous people, you know,
Right.
with their child. I mean, what tremendous courage. And I look at those children, they're trailblazers.
Yeah.
They're wonderful, strong, beautiful people. And the parents to have that kind of courage, to be number one in line, to give it a shot, you know.
Right.
Uh, these are
It's
what
amazing.
MSD parents really are. I
Yeah.
mean, they're resilient, they're strong, they're under, they bounce back because they have to. Your children
Right.
need them to, and they do. I admire them, every one of them.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
It's amazing courage and this
really,
tenacity to figure it out because it's every
yeah,
single step of this
yeah,
is difficult, and but you're
absolutely.
right. And I think you said yesterday, you're like, don't, or maybe it was Kathleen said, don't what if yourselves to death.
Yeah,
Like, or what are you
exactly.
going to do then? What are you going to do
Right.
then? Or what if,
Yeah,
it's like, I'm not, we aren't to the bed sore part yet. So
yeah,
like, I'm not going to go there,
yeah.
but
When
we're,
if it occurs, it
almost at the
occurs.
catheter part. So like, I'm thinking about that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And you
yeah.
just handle you handle excuse me, you handle each issue as it comes. But I guess I would say to the MSD families and the parents, trust your instincts, trust in yourself. There's nobody who cares more about your child than you, and you're
Mhm.
going to, as I every night when I say a prayer, Kathleen and I do at dinner time, we just privately pray for Barbie.
Mm.
And at her funeral, the one thought that came to mind, and I think the other family parents will probably share the same thought or have the same thought. And it's probably the greatest accolade you can give to any person, whether the president of the United States or to a simple child who dies from MSD. Barbie's presence in every person's life that she met, she made every one of them a better person. And that's true. She made me a better person. There are people that I know that are friends with are kind of sarcastic people, and everybody, they always try to be, whatever. But even that person I knew, as sarcastic as he was, everything was wrong with the world. Whenever he talked to Barbie and met Barbie, he melted.
Mhm.
He never said a bad word about her, and he always went out of his way to acknowledge her. Barbie made him a better person. And I don't know of any person who ever came in contact with Barbie. I don't know any person who wasn't a better person because they met her. And I'm sure when you think and reflect back quietly on all the people that Willow came in contact with,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
every one of them, I mean,
They're little angels that, do
well,
that.
the
They do
children
that
are,
to
but the
people. They,
people who meet them, at least in that moment,
yeah,
when they're in contact with them,
right.
are better people. Now,
Hmm.
what better accolade can you give to a person than they made other people around them better people themselves?
Hmm.
And I can say that for Barbie, and I'll bet you every MSD parent who reflects back on the people
Yeah.
who have come in contact with their child, those people are better people, at least for that moment, for that brief period of time. And I can't think of a better accolade. And I tell God, that's my witness to Barbie.
Funny, the new computer I built is so quiet.
I think that she is, I think,
Tom's
oh
messing
yeah,
up my.
see,
Yeah,
one thing, okay,
sorry.
okay. No, but I think that's the best accolade you can give to any human being.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're amazing. I mean, totally impacted. I mean, this would not have happened without Barbie and without Willow.
Right,
So, they forever changed things. And so, they
right.
all have a huge impact. And yeah, for that, I'm thankful.
Absolutely.
All right, John. I think we got a lot out there, so
Okay.
I appreciate you taking the time and
My pleasure.
sharing your experience and your emotion and we'll put this out there, see what people say.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.